Thank you. Okay, I'm supposed to see a red icon somewhere, but I'm not able to see anywhere. So, are we recording? Okay, thank you. So, good morning. Uh, good morning, Lambda. So, hope you're all doing good today. I hope you all had a really, really good day yesterday. I hope the project was not too hard. Pretty much what we covered during the lecture. So, how do you guys feel about Formic and Yup? Respond only with emojis. Okay, mixed feelings, I guess. Right, it's mostly positive, I guess. Like, it's obviously easier than writing all the state stuff yourself. Uh, so yeah, so this has generally been the pattern for you guys. We often learned to do some stuff the normal way, the long way, the tedious way, and then immediately after, we find there's a library for us to do that. So this is not just a pattern with Lambda. I could tell you that this is a pattern with when you go and work too. So you're often uh, you often find one solution, the hard way to do it something, and after a while you discover a new way to do it, or you invent your own custom utilities to do it. So that's how it is. Uh, so that way you appreciate the value of the the shortcut. So today it's going to be client-side authentication. I'm gonna give you this link once again. Let me know if you have, if all of you can access this page. We're gonna be sticking to the training kit pretty much today as well. All right, just give me a thumbs up if you have access to this page. Okay, I assume everyone has access to this. All right, so today is going to be about client-side authentication. So big words. So authentication is the main thing in this topic. So who can tell me what authentication is? I'm not looking for a really technical answer. We're more of a, like in normal parlance, you've heard of this word a lot. You've been on websites and you've heard this word a lot. So, can anyone tell me in short what authentication is? Basically, saying you're good, verification, allowing you to access, validating login credentials, keeping the bad guys out. I like that definition. Validation of information. And this is really good. Identifying someone, making sure a person can only access their own data. That is a very, very, very good way to put it. Unlocking a door, yes, definitely. And yeah, so yeah, it seems like everyone has like a pretty good idea about what we mean when we say authentication. And that particular answer by Mohammed saying identifying someone, that is, I like that answer the most, because authentication is usually something about identifying someone. Like on the internet, anyone can pretend to be anybody, right? So someone is sending you an email, and it could be anyone. So how do you identify who's sending you the email, right? Your email provider is going to make sure that you're only getting genuine emails, right? Most of the email services has a spam filter, and if you want to send a mail to someone, it's going to ask you to log in, right? It's going to ask you to identify yourself. So so authentication is basically giving you an identity on the internet. So that's what authentication is. You're gonna be learning a lot more about authentication in the the Web Unit 4 module. Like, you'll be building your own authentication service from scratch. So that's coming up when you go on to the backend section. But today we're just going to have a very small introduction to authentication, and we're just going to look at the React side of things when it comes to authentication. We're going to be learning something about React Router, and we're going to be using Formic. We're going to be using Axios to make requests and authenticating ourselves. Okay, so let's quickly look at what I'm saying when there's a need to verify identity. Basically, your server has access to database. That means all the private information. For example, your social media profile has your phone number, probably has your email, has your some private information. And this information is not for everyone. Some of the information is private, some of the information is public. Like if I go to let's say medium.com, the information that I find, these are public pages. You can see I'm logged in, but even if I were to log out, I'm still going to be able to go to some article and read it. So this is public information. On the other hand, even a service like Medium has some logged in information. For example, on Medium, I could write some articles, but before I could publish the articles, I can save them as drafts. And these drafts are something only for my eyes. Or if I go to profile, I go to the profile information. So I could look at my personal information. I can edit my profile. Let's go to edit profile mode, and I can edit and enter my name, add a photo, and all that stuff. But if I'm going to just copy this URL, okay, and I'm going to sign out. And if I try to go to this URL again, you see, did you notice what happened? I'm just going to like add edit here. Watch what happens to the URL. Did you guys notice what happened? Could someone point out what happened? Sure. Yes, I was redirected. It said no. Basically, yeah, because I'm not authenticated. Who am I? So the server, the Medium server, does not know who I am because I just logged out. And you can't let just people go into some other's profile and change their name. But you can look at their public profile. Like I can look at my own public profile and I can see what kind of articles I've been a part of. So this is public information, but being able to edit a name or upload a photograph should be restricted to that particular user. And when we try to forcefully go to that edit page, the server kicks us out saying that no, you're not allowed to go to that screen. You need to go to the public page. So this is partly a functionality of the server, but there's some major part happening here with respect to client. So when I say client, it is your React application. It is the user interface we're talking about. Like if you aren't authenticated, if I were to go to this page and if my browser suddenly crashed or said some 404, that wouldn't be good user experience. A good user experience would be to say that you're not allowed to look at this page, and it redirects you to a most relevant page, like the page that you actually have access to. That is a really good user experience. So that's what we're going to be learning today, how to provide that kind of user experience from the client side. So when you're not allowed to view some data, then you should probably redirect your users to a more friendly page. Like you might have noticed some other kind of behavior in websites when you're trying to go to a page and you're not logged in. The server redirects you to the login page, and you log in. And when you log in, it takes you back to where you originally intended to go. That is another very good user experience. So that is what we're going to learn today. We're not going to learn anything about the actual server's functionality itself, but we're going to have a mock authentication service and learn how to do this kind of redirects to provide a better user experience. So does that make sense? Do you guys have a good idea about what's client-side authentication? All right, cool. So why do we need to authenticate? Again, we don't we only want genuine requests to pass through. So we don't want everyone to be able to access the database, and even genuine requests, we're only going to allow a small part of the database. We're only going to allow access to one particular information. So that is being done at the server side, and usually at the server side there is a something called a middleware. So there's a database, and there's a protecting layer called middleware. This essentially filters the request, the API requests that hit the middleware, and it only allows genuine requests to go in there. And what do I mean by genuine requests? The kind of requests which are, which have an identity. But just like looking at the request, the middleware should be able to tell, okay, Ash is trying to log in, instead of like trying to say, I have no idea who's sending this API request. In that case, the middleware sends back. So the middleware is going to check for identity. Essentially, you need to provide an identity, and that's how it's going to allow. So sort of like you're trying to enter some office, you're basically given an access card, or you're given an identity card. The security guard usually checks for that and lets you in. So how does the middleware actually do it? For one thing, you could use username and password, right? So when someone sends a request, you can ask for username and password. You just like cross-questioning, saying, okay, you want access to information, but tell me who you are. Then you provide the email and the password, and the server is going to check if the password and email match, and it's going to say, okay, you are authenticated to then view the page. But then, right, so, but then, okay, let me sign in again. Right, I've signed in. Although I did not enter username and password, you can imagine that somehow happens in the background, because we're doing something called, we're signing in with Google. So that's a different topic. But you can imagine that I had to enter the username and password. Notice how, so after that, anytime I go to a restricted page, I'm not asked for the username and password over and over again. Right? So it will be a ridiculous user experience if you want to ask username and password for every single action the user wants to make, right? So a better user experience would be to ask only the username and password once, and somehow remember that this person is already authenticated until this person presses the log out button. So till the time the user presses the log out button, the server has to somehow remember that this person is logged in. But here's the thing, the server could do no such thing. What we refer to this kind of approach is called a stateless transfer. It's called a representative stateless transfer. That is a REST. You probably heard of the word somewhere. If you haven't heard, there's no problem. But there's one thing you need to understand, is that every single request, every API request that you make to a server is independent of each other. What does that mean? If you send the username and password once as the first request, and then you issue a request to look at some private information, the server has no way, a server will not attempt to remember that you first sent the username and password. So how does this kind of happen? How does the server know that you are authenticated without asking for the username and password with every request? So that there are several approaches for that. And one of the approaches, the way most of the website works, is with the magic of cookies. Have you guys heard of? You guys heard of cookies, right? So does anyone have any ideas what a cookie is? I meant a browser cookie. So any guesses? What is a cookie? Storing user info, tracking object. Cookies are stored data. Okay, small piece of information stored on client. Right. That's really a good answer. Yes, Melanie, the cookies look like that. Right. And little breadcrumbs of data goodies, like a token, but for everyone. Okay, all good answers. You guys seem to have a good idea. If you didn't know, you can actually go to your Chrome settings, and look at the cookies. So where is it? Ugh. Uh, they keep changing the settings here. So it's going to the advanced and in the advanced. There should be certificates. There's clear browsing data. Uh, I'm not able to. Search bar? Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Content. There's cookies. Let's search for cookies. Guess we're hungry. It's inside site settings. Okay. Thank God. So if I go, I'm gonna see all cookies and data. You're gonna see a lot of websites here. So it seems the browser most of you guys were right. It is something that we store inside the browser, so it's something that lives on your local system. But these are for example, there's a cookie from facebook.com, and when you look at it, it's not going to make any sense at all because this is encrypted. So there is a cookie on my system, and you can just see that it expires on 30th of July 2020. So that's probably when I'll be logged out of Facebook if I don't press the logout button manually on the Facebook. So uh, so uh, so this is one way where we first log into Facebook, and the Facebook servers send some cookie back. Cookie is just like this. This is a cookie. What do you see here? This small string, that is a cookie. The server is going to send this particular string back, and we store the string. The browsers are programmed to store the cookies until such time, until the expiry date. And with every request, when I use Facebook, with every request, the browser sends the string back to the server. For us, it doesn't make any sense, right? This is gibberish. There's encryption. But if you send the string back to the server will actually be able to decrypt this content, and probably this decrypted content is going to tell the server that this is Ashwin, So that's one way to do authentication. So that way, uh, you don't have to enter your email and password every time you change a page on Facebook, because your browser automatically does this in the background. It sends the cookies whenever you're going to a page. So that is one way, and there's another way. So I see a question: can websites make poisonous cookies that put viruses on computers? I don't think so. Although some malicious scripts can steal your cookies and pretend to be you, right? So someone were to steal this content and put this cookie on their browser. It's technically possible to impersonate me. Like, even without my username and password, if you could steal my cookies, you can actually impersonate me on the internet. So that is possible, of course. That's why websites these days are much more intelligent. They don't just rely on some random string that you sent. They also have these multi-factor authentication. They have layered security, and if they see some suspicious activity, like one time you're logging in from an IP in India, and then the next second you're kind of logging in from somewhere else in the world, immediately that's going to raise concerns. So they're going to ask if this is really you. You know how it goes. So this is just a way for you to. So essentially, this cookie is like you can draw a parallel to the identity card analogy. So your company issues you an ID card, and you show it at every every place, so people know it's you. So the cookies are something like that. And that is not the only way to do it. There's another way to do it. Uh, Muhammad said, "You better clear the token." Yeah, I should. I don't worry. I'm gonna go and delete it, and I'm gonna log in again. So that's going to give me a different string. So every time I log in, it's going to give me a different token, right? That brings us to the token example. So there's another popular way of doing authentication, of identifying each, identifying yourself with each API request. That way is like, we first send our login credentials just like this. We send the username and password to the server, and the server is going to find if there's a user called John, and it's going to say if John has the password of password. And if it is true, it is going to return something similar to cookies. It's going to return something called a JSON web token. A JSON web token is essentially going to be a huge string. Again, it's going to be mostly gibberish. It's not going to be it's encoded. There's some data in there, but it does not make any sense to the user. But what we do with that data is that next time we send another API request, we're going to put that data, that particular token, onto the headers and send it. So the server will then look for this particular token. It'll decode the token and then say, okay, this is John. So this string identifies John here, and it's going to send back some information that are for the eyes of John only, right? So that is another way. This is a more popular way without dealing with cookies. First of all, cookies are found to be vulnerable, and with the modern approach with React and Axios, we're not only using browsers to look at data. We're also using Axios, and we're making API requests, right? So so essentially, this approach of sending in a token works with anything. It's not just browsers. You could just like make a web scroller, a legal web crawler with Python or Node.js, and still authenticate yourself by sending in a token. So before we proceed, I'd like to pause for questions. Philip Johnson asks, so the token is stored in the local storage instead of cookies? Yes, that's right. So that's what we're gonna look at it today. So we could store it in local storage. And we'll also discuss about the dangers of storing in local storage and how we can, overcome that. So is everyone clear about the authentication process? Okay, see some thumbs up. What is the difference between a token and a cookie? Nothing. Not a big difference at all. Cookies are stored in special cookie storage in the browser. So their cookies were very specially made for browsers to use, and token is just like a general thing. So inside the cookie, you actually see some token, right? So if you go here, this is a token. This string is a token. And people sometimes put the token in the cookies, or sometimes they put the token on the local storage and retrieve it manually. So because remember, cookies are being sent by your browser automatically. So whenever you make a request from the browser sends the cookies automatically in. So you can generate a token like this, like you can generate a token, and technically you can put this token on the cookies and let the browser send the token back to the server. Any more questions? Will we learn how to make a cookie? Not today, but you're going to learn about cookies and sessions and much more about authentication in your web unit 4. In fact, you'll be building those systems from scratch. You're going to be building a service that will give back cookies and set users on user information on session. All right. So let's quickly take a 5 minute break, and when we come back, we'll start making some API requests and see how this thing works. All right, let's get started. Great question by Dave. He asked, like, could you do everything by just sending the login credentials every time, or are there things that you can only access after getting an auth token? So the answer to that is that it's just like how the server is implemented. So when you go to the backend section, you'll learn that you are the person who decides how it should go. It's just that the most popular method is to just get the credential only once and issue a token, and and then after that you only authenticate using token. So if you remember how the training kit works, the moment you try to enter into this page, you're prompted with a uh, authentication box, and the moment you enter your credentials, you're logged in. And if I close this training kit window again, and if I try to open it again, usually I'm not asked for the password again. That's because, again, in the I'm sure if we dig into our settings, you could find the cookies that uh, the training kit is being using. Let's go find it. I'm gonna go to learn.lambdaschool.com. Uh, where is it? Oh, apparently we don't have a cookie from Lambda School, lambdaschool.com. Okay, let's dig into the browser and see if we have anything on the local storage or the session storage. I did have something from Lambda School, but let me look at it again. Okay. Oh, here it is. Okay, it's lambdaschool.com. Okay. Yeah, that explains why you need to log in every time. So one of these cookies there we go. This is the JSON web token. So you don't realize, but this is how normally a JSON web token looks like. And we can actually take this token and go to jwt.io. Okay, and we can paste a token here. So this is normally how the JSON web token looks. And here we go. This is the encoded information. Again, all gibberish, but this makes perfect sense to the to the server. So there's a long ID, there's a cookie ID, there's a device ID, and this probably on the server side, this ID would probably point to something that would say this identifies me as Ashwin. So that's how our training kit works. So they store the JWT in the cookies so that every time I go to a different page, right? So I'm going to a different page. Essentially, we're making a GET request to this particular URL. And when we make a GET request, our browser sends this particular token. And at the back end, you can imagine the token is then decoded to get a cookie ID. And this ID is then used to look up on the user, right? Cool. So enough of all the theoretical information. Let's dive in. Okay. So I've got this code sandbox. I'll paste the link here so I can follow along. And so far, this code sandbox has nothing. It only has some styles written, some font set, some reset done. There's nothing else on this page, and we're gonna do everything from scratch. You can click on the link and follow along. And we're going to use Axios, we're going to use Formic, and let's also use Yup, just to get some more reps. It's always good to get more reps. So we're going to use all the stuff that we used yesterday and sort of reiterate. And I've got a backend which will do all of the things that I just said. So let's first import Axios. Okay, and then let's immediately expose Axios on the window so that we can use the Axios object from console. Right? We're not going to put anything on the screen yet. Okay, so let's see if we have access to Axios, and yes, we do. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys a URL. I'm typing. Okay, so this is the URL that is going to give us the token. So if we send an email and a password to this URL, we're going to receive a token back. So the way we send it is, of course, through an Axios post request. So let's try. Let me make this bigger. Oops. Okay. Is this visible, or should I zoom in more? Is this okay? Zoom more? Anything? Okay, pretty good. Okay, so let's create a object. Okay, so we'll say credentials, and we'll say email is, I don't know, abc@xyz.com, and we'll choose a really strong password that's tough to break, which is password. And Richard asked, wait, how did you get access to the Axios on the console? So in my index.js, I write this line, window.axios equals Axios. So what this essentially does is like it declares Axios in the global scope. So it can free access anything from the global scope. This is just like JavaScript. You can even access the app function from so I could just say window.app equals app, and this is going to expose app on the console. So if I go here and say app, you're going to see you see that there's something here. So what will happen if I call this function? What do you guys think it's going to happen? Will the div suddenly appear on screen? Is it going to show something? It's totally off topic, but it's fun to do stuff like this. Okay, a lot of people typing. I don't think it'll show anything. Richard, you're getting an error that Axios isn't defined. Did you import Axios from Axios? And you had this line exactly. So let me save this. I think it's saved. Try to go to this link again and see if this works from your console. Okay, coming back to this. So you're saying it doesn't show anything. Yeah, that's right. So when we call this app function like this, oops, we're actually going to see an object being returned. And this object is going to have props and all that stuff. There's the style and all that. So top secret information, guys, don't tell it to anyone. All your React components are essentially going to return objects. Although it appears as if we're returning some HTML, they're actually going to return plain JavaScript objects that look like this. It is actually the React DOM that takes these objects and constructs HTML elements out of it. So that's the big secret behind React. So anyway, off topic. So we have another off-topic question. Yes, I'm going to encourage that. Is there any reason why we use Axios over Fetch? Yes, but there are some reasons. First off, Axios is totally backward compatible. Axios is based on promises. What that is to say that if you should get request, you're going to get a promise back. Again, fetch is also a promise-based function. It's built in. You don't need any packages. But fetch is part of ES 2015. So it's not going to be backward compatible. It's not going to work on the old browsers. And even if it did work, I think it has inconsistencies across browsers. But in the near future, you're going to see all the old browsers disappear. Then you probably won't need Axios. But for now, Axios is useful because it's backward compatible. And not only that, Axios has a lot of methods. Look at that. It is a library with a lot of methods on it. There's this axios.all. Axios.all basically takes an array of Axios requests and runs all those requests parallelly and return to you an array of results. Hugely, that's really, really useful when you in an actual situation, you'll be making a lot of requests. So, and it also has something called interceptors. This is so you can define your own interceptors, which is to say, like whenever you make a request, before the request is being sent, you could have a function modify some things in the request. So that'll be a request interceptor, and there's an response interceptor. Like before your .then function is called, you could customize the response. Maybe you want to do some data transformations or do something. So interceptors are useful, and it has a lot more stuff. You can refer to the Axios documentation in order to learn more. So fetch does not have all of this. Fetch is like a very, very basic implementation of a promise-based request library. Cool. So Richard, you found your error? Okay, yeah. So yeah, the only thing, like, you need to click this icon, open a new window, so that when we refer to window, we're actually referring to this thing. So this actually runs in an inner iframe, so you may not be able to access Axios from here. All right. Cool. So let's get back on track. So we have our credentials, right? And we have our URL, the authentication endpoint. So if we post this data to this authentication endpoint, we're going to see something like this. We're going to see a message from the server and a token. So let's try that. Let's say axios.post URL, and we're going to post our credentials, right? And then let's console log the response. Okay, the server responded, and we're getting some data back. And the data says authenticated successfully, and lo and behold, what do we see? The long token that we found on the training kit, right? The training kit stored this token on the website. So let's copy this token and go to the go here, and paste this token. And look at this. The payload has the email. So it has abc@xyz.com. Remember, that's what we sent, right? So the credentials here, let me look at it. So email is abc@xyz.com, and this token decodes to that information. So the server knows whenever we sent this token, it was sent by someone with an email ID of this. So I'm sorry, am I going too fast? So do you guys want me to repeat something? Oh. So what did you guys miss? Yeah, I'll go over that one more time. All right, let's go over it one more time. So like we discussed, right, there's a server, there's a particular URL to which if we send our credentials, the server is going to respond with a token, just like the token that we saw on the training kit's cookies, right? So the way we send a token to the server is by actually posting to that particular URL. So this is the URL that we have. I can give the URL to you guys. I'll paste it here. Okay, so when we post the credentials to this URL, and credentials is just a normal object, right? So when we post, can post URL credentials, then console log. The credentials get posted, and the server authenticates and gives you a token that identifies you. So does this make sense? Okay, so normal post request. Okay, you guys able to connect it with back to the cookie data that I showed? It looks something similar. And when we put that cookie data here, it gave us an encrypted ID. In this case, we're just seeing an email here. It depends on server. It depends on how a server is implemented. You might find a different data on the token. So what should we be doing with that token sent back to us? Very good questions. Richard, where were the credentials? I just made an object called credentials like here. So I just declared credentials and said email is this and password is this. So that's where credentials come from. Madison asks, it gives you the token automatically. Yes, this is a dummy server that I just made for this lecture. It's not actually going to check your password and email. It's just going to assume that whatever is here is right. But in a real server, what will happen is like it's going to check if this email is already registered and if this is the password attached to that email, and only then it'll issue a token. Otherwise, it's going to give you something like, no, your password is wrong, or the email doesn't exist. So, but this is a practice server. It's just going to give you a token no matter what credentials you give. And Christian is asking, what should we be doing with that token sent back to us? Yes, that's where we're heading. You're going to see shortly what that token is going to entitle us to do. Right, I see some people typing. Dave asked, you didn't have to console log REST data. That's a little cool little trick that I'm doing here. Watch what's happening here. Let me look at where's the. Yeah, I'm passing the console.log function into the then. Remember, console.log is just a function, right? So this is a function, and .then requires a function. So I'm just passing console log into .then. So whatever argument that particular function will be received is directly piped onto the log function, and it gets logged. What we're doing right now is what logging in looks like, right? Yes. So this is what you would see when, so this is what your, so essentially logging in is just making a post request to a particular URL and getting the token back from there. That's what modern, in the client-side authentication, that's what logging in looks like. Right, I see some more people typing. Let's wait. Is there a command to sanitize input like PHP has real escape string, or do we not concern ourselves with malicious code being sent through forms? Yes, that's a really, really great question. So you would essentially be doing that kind of escaping at the server side. In the back end, you would definitely have to sanitize input before you store into the database. You might have heard something called SQL injection attack, right? So that is like if you receive an input from the user, and if you use that string directly to query against the database, technically the user could send a delete statement in their input and delete all your data. So that's called SQL injection, and you can prevent it at the back end, but not at the front end. That's not our job. Richard, you're having an error. It says request failed with status code 400. So that is really strange. So if you fail to send email and password, if you send something else, you're probably going to see that error. Like if I forget to send the password, I only send the email, I'll probably get an error that says bad request. Yes. So make sure you have both email and password spelled that way. It's just going to be email and then password, everything lowercase. So if you don't see, if you don't get that, then you're gonna see something. So in order to get the full error, you should actually add a catch statement like this, and doesn't fully log. Let me. So error, usually a detailed response is in error.response.data. Let me see. Yes. So if you have a catch statement like this, let me quickly paste it onto your Slack. So Axios errors have a response object, and inside response object, there's a data object that is coming from the server. So if you type this, Richard, you'll be able to see what exactly the error is, and there should be a friendly message that would say what you're exactly missing. So in our case, we did not send the password, so the message says body should have required property password. All right, you're getting a status 200 and a text OK, and you see there's a data object and you're getting the token back. Yes, that is good. You're good to go. All right, so let's now send a different email ID and let's see what happens. So again, we set it to a very strong password. And this time we will have another creative email ID, DEF. Oh my God. Password is going to be password. Then let's post. And this time, if you could, should have really copied that token here. Okay. So let's have this token. This is the first token that we received. And this time, when we change the email, we're getting another token. Although it might be hard for you guys to see, these two tokens, they're for the most part similar, but at the end you could see that this particular part has something different, right? It's a different kind of gibberish. So let's get the new token and put it here. And if you see, the email ID is different. So this is how the server would know if Ashwin is logging in or if it's Trevor who's logging in. So this particular long string, this long gibberish, this is going to identify, it's going to provide an identity for you. So does anyone has any questions with this? Are you guys following? I know still we're not doing anything with this token. That's another burning question you might have. What are we going to do with this token? Okay, we're all seeing that long gibberish, but what good is this? We'll get there, but I just want you guys to understand that this is just a normal post request and you're getting something back. Nice, Richard, you got it. Is this token insecure if you get decoded? Yes, if you put some information like email in here, it's definitely insecure because anyone can decode it. Like you can just go to jwt.io and paste it, and you can actually see who this token belongs to. So it is a bad practice to have email on the token, like this. But that is just like that kind of bad practice was done by me. So I just put together this mock server. In an actual server, you will never see information like this. Remember when we had this token, like let's go back to this Lambda token, the Lambda school token, and we put it here, you won't actually see any kind of sensitive information here. You're going to see more gibberish, as if this wasn't enough. You're going to see more gibberish. And usually in token, we only have some data that does not make any sense to the user. It's going to be information that only the server can do it. And yes, IAT is like issued at. Donald had it right. So yeah, so we don't have to worry about the token per se. Yeah, that is a really good question. It is insecure to have email on the token. That's a privacy concern. Anyway, any more questions? Are we good to go? All right, let's move on then. Cool. So what are we going to do with this token? Okay, so our server has a protected endpoint. So that is going to be the same as URL. It's going to be this. It's called protected. So let me give this URL to you guys. So this URL has some protected information in there. I mean, it pretends to have some protected information here. What do you mean by protected? So if I try to make a GET request to this protected URL, right? So protected URL, and let's do same console.log and catch if there's an error. Console log e.response.data. Okay. And you're going to see a message that says invalid token. You're not permitted to view this page, right? So that's what protected URL means. Just like, remember how we saw that in the Medium website, if I try to go to the edit page, you're not allowed to see that. So probably in the background, the Medium website is trying to make an API request and it gets this forbidden error. You're not allowed to view until you're logged in. Well, how do you log in? How can you let the server know that you're logged in? Does anyone want to talk? Does anyone want to take any guesses? It has something to do with this, this little art here. How can you let the server know that you're actually logged in? Yes, exactly. You guys got it. So you need to send the token to the server to let the server know that you're actually authenticated, that you're actually a genuine user. So to send a token, if you're probably posting, if it is a post request, it makes sense to put the data inside the body. But in a GET request, you can't send any object along with the URL. So that's a GET request does not allow you to send any objects. Only a POST request will allow you to send an object. So how do you actually send the token with a GET request? Marcus asked, do you also have to pass a token or cookie along with the URL? In this case, we only need to pass the token. So Donald says configure Axios to send headers along with URL. So yes, that's the answer. Is that you have something called headers that are being sent with every request that you make. So Axios is by default having some headers. And here it says the content type is application JSON. What it's essentially saying is that whatever you're trying to post, the credentials, it is of the JSON format, and it's encoded using the UTF-8 encoding. So with every request, you send some metadata, and these are called headers. And this is one way you can send some additional information about the request. In our case, when we send the GET request, you can actually send some additional data. So this is how it's going to look. It's going to be headers. Okay, And inside headers, you need to pass a header called authorization. And inside the authorization, you actually need to say bearer, and then you need to paste the token. Okay, where's the token? Here it is. Okay, we need a long token in here. And let me just send it, and then we'll pause to explain about what's happening. So I'm gonna send. Oops. Oh, I did not close the curly brace. Okay. And now the status is 200 because we sent the token. And you're going to see a message that says your email ID is def@xyz.com. Let's do it once more, but this time let's use the other token that we got. Let's use this token and see what message we're getting. Here, I'm going to replace this long token with this, and then send it. And if we go here, we're getting a different message. Previously, we had a message that said your email ID is DEF, and now we're having a message that says your email ID is ABC. So you can see how the message is customized for each different user. Let me give this piece of code to you guys so that you can try it. I want you guys to try it and then probably guess what's happening, and then I will explain what's actually happening. So just I'm going to give you guys 2 minutes to give it a try. And once you're done, give me a thumbs up if you got it or not. If you didn't get it, give me a thumbs down. Oh yeah, Carlos, just go paste the code snippet onto your console and see what you're getting back. And just in case you guys need the URL to the sandbox again, here you go. So once you inside the sandbox, remember to press this open in new window button. And once you go here, open your console and just paste the snippet that I just gave you guys. Okay. Oh yes, Madison, you need the protected URL. I just pasted it a couple of messages ago. I'll forward it again. So you need this URL that we're posting to. Okay, with respect to others, I guess you saw something. So what's actually happening here? Like I said, you're sending some metadata with your request, and in that data, you're sending the token back. And what is this bearer here referred to? Again, this is an implementation detail. Each server is going to respond differently, and it so happens that the server that I designed is going to expect the token in this format. It's going to expect the token to be followed by the word bearer, So that's how it is designed. You would see some other servers which will have expect token in this format without any other words. But this doesn't usually change. You would need a header that's called authorization, and you would generally pass a token. Some servers work like this. Some servers would expect the word bearer in front. It again, it's the choice of the developer who actually made the server. So that's what's happening. So the server's reading the token from the header, and it's authenticating you, and it's saying that this is ABC. And if you forget to send the header, or if your token is malformed, like you try to steal the token, and it's like somehow you didn't get all of the token, you send the wrong token, and then you're gonna say you're gonna get an error that says, okay, this is not. Oops, we're getting a different error. Okay. Yes. So it's basically not going to allow you if you don't have a token, you're going to get a forbidden error. So if I don't send the authorization at all, I'm going to see invalid token, right? And then if I had the authorization, but if I misspelled authorization, something like this, again, you're going to see the same error. And I think it actually doesn't matter if it is a uppercase A or lowercase a. Let's just find out. Yes, it actually doesn't matter if it's an uppercase or lowercase. So there you go. So that's basically how authentication works. So is everyone clear with this? Again, remember this diagram. It's always step one. You get the token, and then from then on, you just send the token with every request. Nice. So let's do one more thing. So you remember do you remember how probably you remember how I accidentally closed this learning it tab, but then I opened it again. When I opened it again, it didn't ask for my password. That is because we saw it stores the token in the cookie. So the moment this page loads, the application, the front end application here, it looks for the cookie and it retrieves the token so that it doesn't need to ask you for your credentials. So you can imagine that the same thing could happen here. Like if we accidentally refresh the page and we lost the token actually, and we have lost the token. I mean, we're still having it in the history, but let's say you had a local variable, like you had a token, you stored the token like this in a variable, or you can imagine you stored the token in the state. URL, I'm missing the URL. Okay. Oops, apparently this token is wrong. The authorization is misspelled. Thank you for catching that. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dustin. Carlos, yes, thank you. So you had something like this, right? You do something like this, and you accidentally refresh the page, right? And now you don't have a token. Token is going to be undefined. It's going to say undefined. And if you look, even if you store it in a React state, if you accidentally refresh the page or close the tab and try to open the tab again, you're gonna lose all the state. So that would mean that you need to ask the user to log in again in order to get a fresh token. That's probably not a good user experience, right? Like we don't see that on the training kit. Even if I refresh the page, I'm not being asked for the token. That is because the token is being stored somewhere inside the browser. So we could do something similar. We could also store the token inside the browser, but we will not store it inside the cookies. Instead, what we're going to use is something called the local storage. The local storage is a browser API. Basically, local storage has two important functions. It has a set item function and it has a get item function. So you can imagine it's just going to work like this. So if you give a set item needs two arguments. So you could say token and you're going to say ABC. That sets the item in the local storage. And if you can actually head over to the application tab, open the local storage, you're going to see this data here. And watch what happens when I refresh the page. And you see this token is persisted on the browser. So this way, whenever you want the token, you can get it from local storage.getItem, and you can search for the token, and your token is always going to be there. And even if you refresh the page, you lost all your local variables, you lost all your state, but still the local storage is going to remember that. So this is the technique that we will be using in order to persist the login, just like this, right? So that's all the technical details that you need to know. Now let's make use of all the things that we've just learned and build a React application on top of it. And let's provide a really good user experience by letting the user refresh the page and still having them on the same page. So we'll take a quick 5-minute break, and we return back. We're gonna have we're gonna type some React code. All right, let's get let's get back. It seems like a lot of people are facing issues with forking projects in GitHub. Um, yeah, it seems like Frank has something regarding that. Okay, his suggestion is to start a new branch, create a new branch, and start from the beginning. Okay, I'll probably show you guys how to, from an existing project, how to create a new branch and then just start over in that particular uh, on the same project. So, okay, anyway, let's get back to where we are, where we were. So so our plan is to have two different pages. One page is going to be the login page, and the other page is going to be your profile page, which is going to be a protected page. And we're going to let the user see the profile page only if they have a token in the local storage. If they don't have a token in the local storage, we're just going to redirect them to the login page. So that is the plan. So let's first make two pages. We're going to use React Router. And I think you guys are familiar with how React Router works. So we need to import, shouldn't be React Router DOM. So I think I had the wrong React Router dependency here. I'm pretty sure it's going to be, it has to be React Router DOM. So it's a small change. Save and send the link again. So React Router DOM. And we're going to use the autocomplete to get browser router. We need routes, and we need a link component so that we can navigate to different pages, right? And we need to wrap our app around browser router. I assume you guys are familiar with how React Router works. I'm not going to explain. Let's quickly make the routes and be on our way. So let's make two different routes. Nice to hear that you're routing pros. Let's say on the root path, we will display a login component. We don't have a login component yet. We'll make one soon. And on the profile path, let's render a profile component. Okay, these don't exist yet. And let's also have two links to login. We have another link to profile. Okay, let's go and quickly make this these login and profile components. Is there any particular reason you don't import browser router as router? There's no particular reason. You can alias this as router, but it's really isn't necessary. You could just like use it's again a personal preference. I just don't. I find it just like useful to have browser router. So it's personal preference. So I'm gonna make a new folder here called components. Inside the components, I'm gonna make a login.js and a profile.js. Okay, and here the first thing I will do in any React component is import React from React and quickly make a function, and I would immediately export that thing. The export statement is the often forgotten step in any kind of React project. So we will just return a normal div that says login here, just to make sure it works. And we'll go to profile. We'll just copy this and paste it here. And we're just going to rename everything into profile. Cool. So here we just need to import those two components. So I'm going to say import login from component/login, and profile. I'm just going to say profile. Okay, I'm going to give this a save, and hopefully we don't see any errors. Nice. And since on the login page, we're actually seeing a login, so let me make this extra clear. It's coming from the login page, and here we have the profile page, the content here. So I'm saving these files as soon as I type them. So if you ever get lost, you can have this link open in another tab and refresh to see what you missed. Okay, so you'll see the thing actually works. Oh, this is a weird error. Like when we're on the login page, we see login page, but when we're on the profile page, we're seeing both login and profile page. Does anyone have any idea why this is happening? Have to use exact. That is right. You guys really are router pros. So we'll use exact here and exact here so that we only see one thing. So we can switch between the login page and profile page. Excellent. Cool, cool, cool. So let's go. Let's design our login form really quick. And we're going to use Farmic, yup, and everything that we discussed yesterday. And I'm not going to explain much. We're just going to quickly get it done. So we'll import with. Here's what I usually do. I just do the empty braces and write the package so that when I come back here and hit Control Space, I actually get the autocomplete so that I don't have to type everything from memory. I'm pretty bad at remembering stuff. I love autocomplete. So going back to what we said yesterday, with Farmic needs to be called twice. The first time you need to give it an object. The object need map props to values method. And this function is just going to return the initial state. We need an email and a password field. Right? So we'll do just like that. And we probably need a handle submit function. For now, let's just console log the values. Just like that. And inside our login, we're going to receive some props here. But we don't need to worry about props because if you remember, if you use the form, not Farmic. If you use the form and field properties, we don't actually have to import any handle change or any function at all. We could just like have the form. So let's say form, give it a class name, form. Okay, and we're going to have a form group. All this is for styling. I had already written the styles up front, and we're just going to use the class names. And we will have a label. It says email. Okay, we'll give it a class name of label. And then we'll use a field property and needs to have a name property. This is compulsory. The type is going to be email, and we don't need any placeholder because we have a label. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Give it a save. Let's make sure that we're getting cool. And let's give it a class name. Input. Right. So okay, I should probably set the display here to block for the margin bottom to take effect. If you guys didn't know, the margin bottom will not work unless that particular element has a display of inline block or flex. It's by default labeled as an inline element, and it cannot have margin bottoms. So this is just a little CSS thing. All right, we have the email now. And I'm going to get rid of the autocomplete because that is kind of annoying when you're trying to develop something, and every time this pops up, I find it kind of annoying. So you can turn that off by saying autocomplete is off. And we're just going to copy this and create another field like so. And we're going to say this is the password field, right? And the name and type, both of that is going to be password. Nice. We have a nice email and password field. And finally, we need a button here. And for the styles, I have a button class that will say submit. And we'll have a little right arrow here. You can have a right arrow like so. You don't need an icon. You could use the HTML entity. This is a HTML entity that says R arrow. It's like RAR. So you can get this little right arrow going here. So, okay, cool. So now let's try entering some values here. And password. And let's open the console and see if everything went right. You should be able to see this object here that says email and password. And remember in our Axios credentials thing, where's that go? Our credentials, yeah, this thing. Remember we posted an object like this, and look at the handle submit button, we have the object just like that. So with no additional effort, we could just directly post this values property onto to the API and get the token back. Right? Is everyone ready to move on? Have you guys taken this down? I know I might be going a little too fast because we're running out of time, and I really don't want to take up your lunchtime again today. I'm being a really bad instructor. Okay, so let's quickly again do some reps with yup. So I'm going to import yup, and remember when just when you import yup, just make sure to use this star syntax to prevent any kind of surprises. So we're going to have yup here, and we're going to have a validation schema, and which is going to be yup.object.shape. Just like prop types, using a comma here. I'm going to say email is just yup.string, and it is of the type email, and it is required. We're not going to really bother about custom error messages. String password, is password even a thing? I don't think so. Great, and just for the sake of fun, let's say the password has to be a minimum length of 6. Okay. All right, so Chrome asked me to save the password. Okay, so let's probably have a little, let's get the error object and a touched object. Errors, let's say if errors, if touched dot email is true, and errors dot first, sorry, it's email, right? Email, then we just we can just display this, right? So, and we can do the same thing for, let's wrap it in a p tag. And we're gonna copy this right here and replace email with password. We're not gonna do any kind of error styling here. Okay, so if the email is touched, email is a required field, password is touched. It does look a little bit ugly, but we're not, we'll just, let's skip the UI part for now. So email cool. This gives you an email, must be a valid email thing. So xyz.com, and password is just going to be password. Nice. So, and if I hit enter, I'm going to see the object here. Nice. Okay. So Trevor asked, do you guys understand the AND pattern? It's a little trick. It's a short circuit. Maybe at the end of the lecture, we can discuss this. If I see one no and I see one maybe, that's totally fine. Basically, this is a shorthand pattern to prevent something from appearing until the first condition is true. All right, we'll do. We have a lot of JS tricks to show off. I'm just getting through the content really quick, and then at the end of the lecture, we can have some JavaScript fun. Okay. So what do we need to do with the values? We need to post these values to the server, right? So let's say the URL is going to be HTTPS mock user server. I apologize for this lengthy URL. And what we're going to do is say axios.post URL, and the data is just going to be the values. But then let's just console log, and on the catch, there's an error. We'll just console.log e.response data. I haven't imported the Axios. Okay, so quickly from Axios. Of course. Cool. So again, password, hit submit. There we go. We get the status 200, and the data contains the token. So what do we need to do with the token? So we need this token in order to make some other requests, right? So how do we get the token from here? And somehow we need that token in our profile page so that we could get the secret message from here. So how do we pass the token from here to here? Adding the token to the local storage. Bingo. Yeah. So that's what we're going to do. We can technically have a state on the app, which is like the super component to both login and profile. And we can pass down a set state function onto the login and probably set the state from here somehow. But that's going to, like I said, if you refresh the page, that state is going to disappear. So we need to store the token somewhere. It will not disappear even after you've refreshed the page. Should we save the token to the state in addition to saving to the local storage? Not necessarily, because anytime we want the token, we can just get it off local storage. It's not a time-consuming operation. Local storage is like pretty fast, so we don't actually need to store that in the state. We can just directly store it, get it from the local storage. How does handle submit know what values is again? Again, we discussed this yesterday. It's some kind of a magic Formic does under the hood. It is going to get the values from the field components and just somehow pass it to our handle submit callback function. Right, so let's quickly. So this is the whole data we are logging. So let's call this response, right? We're going to call this response. If you look at the console log here, we need to go into response, and then we need to go into the data, and then we need to go to token. So let's do local storage dot set item token, and it's going to be response dot data dot token. Okay, let's give this a save. No. And I'm going to let's actually do it from here so that you can inspect the local storage. And we say abcxyz.com, password is password. We actually see no kind of visual feedback, which is bad, but we kind of discussed yesterday how we can give some visual feedback. One way is to reset the form, and you can use the is submitting property in order to show a loading screen or something, but just we're running short of time, so we'll just not do any of that. And you can see the token is on the local storage. And if I refresh the page, you guys already know this token is never going to disappear, right? Cool. So now what we can do is go into the profile. Let's import Axios from Axios. And inside the profile, we're going to use the useEffect function hook. As soon as this component loads, okay, and as soon as this function component loads, what we're going to do is we're going to use Axios. We're going to first fetch the token. So the token is going to be fetched from local storage.getItem token. And if there is a token, what we're going to do is we're going to make a request. And let's also save the profile URL. It's going to be https mock user server rokuapp.com API/protected. Okay, and I'm going to say make a GET request to this URL. And what do we need to add here? What should go inside this object? Laura asks, will the token disappear from local storage if I close my browser and then open again? No, it's going to stay there forever, for all eternity. We need a header in there. That's right. We need a header object, headers. It's plural. It's easy to forget. And what is the header going to be called? Marcus has it right. It's authorization and the bearer plus token. So we say authorization, and we're going to use the template literal, say bearer plus the token. Like that. And let's first console log the result and catch if there's any error. We'll just, for now, console log. But you can actually show a good error message, like a pop-up alert or something when you receive an error. Okay. Give this a save. And what we're going to do is actually go to the profile page. The moment profile page loads, the use effect is going to kick in. Oh, and before I forget, I almost forgot that I did not give a second argument to use effect. What is that going to do? Infinite loop. So that means that we're going to be printing on the console forever and ever. Let's see if that is what actually happens. Go to profile. I see data, but there's no infinite loop. I should be seeing infinite amount of data. Why don't I see anything? I did not provide a second argument to use effect, but there's no infinite loop at all. What's happening here? Yes, exactly. Marcus had it right. Donald had it right, because there's no props on the profile, and we're not using any state, and we're not setting state or changing the props, doing anything that will change the props of the profile. So it actually does not result in an infinite loop. Nonetheless, it's always good to have your dependencies listed explicit here. For us, there are no dependencies. Like maybe if the token was a dependency, we can treat it. Again, the token is like, token would be a good dependency. Like whenever a token changes, this should run again and show a different message. But we probably will log in and log out. So this is fine. We don't have to have any dependencies inside useEffect. And instead of logging the data, the message that comes in, let's store this message inside a state, so that when the application loads the profile page, we'll display the message, this top secret message here. Cool. So we are going to import useState, and let's say message and set message. useState, it's going to be an empty string. And in the profile page, just under, probably use the React fragment here. we'll just display the message here. Nothing's going to happen yet because we're not actually doing anything with the data. We're not setting the state. So response, we can set message to response.data. Ooh. Can perform React state update on an unmounted component. Response.data.message. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, thank you, Christian. So apparently that was causing some problems. I think I know why, because response.data, I think, is a circular object, and that kind of make React go crazy. So that is like cool, right? So let's try one more. Let's go and log in as DEF. I don't know. I'm so creative when it comes to emails and passwords. We'll submit, enter. We don't have a console message. Right now, this is a very, very bad user experience. We don't know if the request succeeded or not. But if we go to profile page, and there it is. There you're going to see a different message here. So you are logged in as another person now. So let's now provide a good user experience. Right now, everything works as intended. But as you can see, this is a very bad user experience. First off, we're not. When you log in, it should automatically take you to the profile page, and yeah, it has to do something like that. So let's fix that now. What we're gonna do is first we'll use the router props here. Remember, when you are using a component like this, you receive some props from React Router. So in the login page, once this request succeeds, what we can do is actually push this URL. We can change the URL to the profile page. So Christian says, let's make a logout button. We delete the token, right? Yes, that's the next step, but let's first get our users into the profile page. And I actually do not know how to retrieve the router props inside the handle submit function. Okay, no problem. This is all fine. So whenever you're using a new library, you run into problems like this, so we're going to do what I would normally do in a work situation. Whenever I do not know something, I would go to the library's documentation, and I think the formic bag, yeah, there we go. The formic bag is passed as the second argument to handle submit function, and the formic bag actually has the props that were passed on to the original function. So let's try to get the formic bag, and we'll try to log the formic bag.props, and hopefully we should be able to see the router props. Hey. So let's do again. And there we go. Look at that. We have the history, we have the location, we have all the props that were passed on to this login form component. Again, through magic, React Router passes some props. So what we can do from here is, once the thing is successful, we can then use the formic bag props.history.push and into profile. So if you remember from React Router, you have a history object which has a push function. So whatever URL you pass here, it'll automatically change the URL, and it'll automatically push the user to that particular profile. Carlos says, you made sense of that documentation like 10 seconds. Yes, that's what you get with experience. You just need you just do a lot of this stuff. Trust me, a year back, this would have taken me like half an hour. So now, like I've done it like 100 times. I know exactly where to look. Cool. So how do we access to those props without passing it through the render from the route? Uh, so there are two ways to use the React router. Actually, yeah. So the route component, actually, you can pass a component is as component, and you can also use render. If you use the render as prop, you need to give it a function here. And so a render is going to look like this. You will receive some props here, and then you do something like this. And if you use this kind of render prop, then you would need to manually pass this props onto this component. But if you use the component and just give it this component, notice how we're not having any angle braces. That means we're just passing this login as a reference here. And inside the the route component, it is going to automatically pass the props onto to that thing. And why do they have these kind of different implementations? Because let's say you have a state on the app, that you have some state on the app, right? And you need to pass that state, some value of the state, onto the login. In this method, you can't actually pass the props here. The route will not actually pass the props onto this this login. So you would need to make use of this render thing. And this is in order to not confuse ourselves, the router props. We get the router props, and what we can do is something like this. We pass the entire router props, and we can also additionally pass our state, right? So whenever you need to pass some other props from outside, apart from the router props, you would need to use this kind of render pattern. In all other cases, when you only want the router props, you can just use the component pattern. That's the difference. All right, I'm gonna get rid of all of this before I run into some weird errors. I'm just missing this. Get rid of this. Oh, okay. We're almost at the end. Okay. So here, we're gonna, why doesn't it understand never? Okay. So if I log in from here, hit submit, man, this is so annoying. It automatically takes me back to the profile page. So that's basically how it's going to work. So that kind of, so again, I'm gonna make a poll, guys, because I'm sorry, I really need some extra time to complete the content. So screw the poll. Just tell me if it's okay to have 15 more minutes of your time. I'm sorry, I'm being a really bad teacher now. Okay, let's keep moving. So what is another good user experience? Like, if I go to the login page, I shouldn't actually see this login page because technically I'm already logged in, right? So if I'm logged in, I shouldn't actually see the login page. I should be redirected to the profile page, like same way with can't think of any website, but if you go to any website, you have a login URL, you enter your password, you're taken into your profile or email inbox. Then if you force yourself to go into the login URL again, it's going to kick you back to the profile saying like, you're already logged in. Why are you trying to log in again? So what we will do is, if someone tries to go to the login page, we will just check if the token exists inside the token exists in the local storage. If the token exists, we'll then just push them to the profile page. We can do that with the help of redirect. We can there's a component in React Router called redirect, right? So what this does, let me show you quickly. we will just make a dummy route, exact path, and say dummy. And here we're going to make use of render because we actually need to provide some props to the redirect component. We don't need any other props. Okay. And we're going to say we need to render redirect and to the root page. So redirect is just like a normal React component, but what it's going to do is when you go to the dummy route, it's all automatically going to redirect to the login function. So you're going to see that. So if I go to the dummy, I should probably have made a link. So let me just quickly make a link. Okay, if I try to go to the dummy, you see how like, notice the URL bar, it goes to dummy and then immediately it goes back to the login page. So we're going to use this redirect function and redirect component in order to redirect if there's a local storage token again. So when the app loads, we're going to check if token exists. So we'll do local storage.get item token. Okay. So when people try to go to the login page here, I'm going to convert this into a render props pattern. We'll receive props. Okay. And we'll say if the token exists, then the user doesn't belong in the login route. So we're going to say return redirect to profile, right? And if the token doesn't exist, that means they do need to be inside the login function. So in this case, we will return the login page. And remember, whenever you use the render props pattern, you manually need to pass the router props onto the component. Let's give it a save, and you're immediately gonna see the profile page because we're logged in. And I'm seeing some kind of error. Yeah, there's no longer error. So when we try to go to the login page, it doesn't allow us to go into the login page because we're logged in. And just to show you that it will not allow, we can go to the login page if we actually delete the token. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this token. Let's do it from the console. So in order to remove an item from the local storage, you have a very friendly remove item function, and you need to pass the key. This is going to be token in this case. Okay, we remove the token. Now if we refresh to go to login page, ooh, okay, so here's error in our plan. We're checking the token only once on the app. We should actually be checking if the token exists inside the login page. So I'm going to quickly take this logic and put it inside the login page. Okay. And we need the redirect here. Import redirect from React router DOM. Okay. And here we can just enter. I know there's a lot of back and forth, but again, okay. No errors here. And in here, every time the login function renders, we're going to check if there's a token. If there's a token, then they have no job here. We're going to just return a redirect to the profile page. Otherwise, we'll perform all this logic. Go here, go here, go to the login page. Yes, now we're going to the login page. So I know I confused the last bit. Do you guys want me to go over it again? Philip's private route. Yes, private route is basically an abstraction of reusability to make in order to do the same logic to check if the token exists and uh, reroute so that we don't have to write this kind of logic in every function. We can actually abstract that away with the help of a higher order component like a private route. Uh, so, okay, we will see. All right, I'm going to go over it again. So just forget about everything. So our goal is if someone is logged in, that would mean that there's a token in the local storage. So if someone is logged in, they shouldn't be allowed to be on the login screen because they have a token and they should go back to the profile screen. They shouldn't be dangling around in the logging screen, right? So how can you prevent that? Well, it's simple. Whenever we try to display the login component, we just check if there is a token already on the local storage. Like if I do this local storage dot get item token, I'm going to receive a null. That's because we just deleted the token. Remember, we removed the item from the token, so that's why you're seeing a null. So we're going to say, so if there's a token, there's going to be a string, and this value will be truly. Otherwise, it's going to be a null. If it is a null, then this condition would fail and this will execute. So what exactly happen if the token exists, if the string exists? That means the function, the login function will do an early exit, right? Because we have a return statement here. None of this code will run. It'll do an early exit. Instead of rendering a div, instead of rendering a form, it renders a redirect component. And a redirect component is a very special component inside React Router. Inside the redirect component, there probably is a code that says props.history.push to wherever this true property is pointed to. We could probably do this ourselves. Like instead of using a redirect component, what we can do is actually get the history object out of here. Remember, because we're receiving it from the router props, we can just do history.push profile. And this is going to have the exact same effect. If I go to the login page, I am on the login page because the token doesn't exist. Let's quickly create a token. Although it's going to be a bad token, but just to show you guys, token, it's going to say fake token. Okay, set the token in, and now if I try to go to the login page, okay. Now if I could try to go to the login page, yeah, I'm getting an error. Yeah, it's because I have a fake token. This thing is failing miserably. Okay. So let's quickly remove the token. Okay, the redirect probably made more sense, but you get the idea what we're trying to do. So redirect to, this is more semantic as well. This is like more readable than history.push because you can actually read it out loud and it makes sense. If there is a token, then please redirect to profile. So that's how readable React is. Let me just quickly remove the item so that we don't run into any errors. Cool. So now if I'm able to refresh, if I go to the login page, yes, we're good to go. So now let's create an actual token. Submit. And we redirect it to the profile page. Now we're going to forcibly go to login page, and it doesn't allow us because there's a token. We're getting redirected, right? Now we need to do the exact opposite inside the profile, right? If someone tries to enter the profile page without a token, we need to then redirect them to the login page. So we can probably copy and paste the whole logic inside the profile, right? Something like this. And instead of saying if there is a token, we're going to say if there's no token, we'll just have to remember to import redirect. Okay, if there's no token, then redirect the user to the login page, just like so. Save, save. Okay, so do it from here. So we're on the profile page because we have a token. We try to go to the login page, which doesn't allow us, and we're on the profile page. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to remove the token item, right? I'm going to remove the token item, which is like essentially logging out, right? If I remove the token item, actually don't see anything changing here because we're not actually monitoring if there's a local storage or not. But if I try to refresh the page and go to profile, you see it kicks us back to the login page. And if I try to go to the profile, I'm not allowed to go to the profile page because the token doesn't exist. So you can probably guess what the logout button function is going to be. Can anyone guess what our logout button is going to do? Remove local storage. That's it. The logout button cannot have a simpler logic than this. All it has to do is to remove the token because we already have the logic to kick it back to the root path, right? So I'm seeing an error here. Where's the error? React hooks use state is called conditionally. Okay, this is some advanced stuff. Okay, in short, we shouldn't be doing this kind of conditional checks inside where we use effect and use state. This is a major issue. So we actually need to perform this logic inside this page. I cannot probably explain, maybe after the lecture, I'll let you guys go, but those of you who are really interested in this error message specifically, we'll probably try to explain why this is the case. This has a very, very lengthy explanation. And if you need I can point to you guys, for those who can't stay, I can point you guys to the React.js website, and there's a hooks. There's hooks FAQ. Okay, I'll probably find that question. There is a FAQ here, why this is a bad idea, why there's this kind of error is a bad idea. But for now, let's remove this logic from here and essentially put it here inside the render. Okay, get the props here. We're going to find the token here. If there's no token, we're going to redirect. And if there is a token, we're going to return the profile with all the props passed into it. And I do have the redirect here, no problems. And we got rid of the error. Save here, and yeah, nothing broke. If I go to the profile page, we don't have a token, so we don't go in there. We can probably use the same pattern over here to do it, but the only reason we didn't get any error here is because we don't have a use state here. But still, this is a bad idea. So homework for you guys. Take this logic and use that logic inside the render here. So that's when the custom private route component comes in handy. So if you look at the training kit, there is a private route component here. There's this private route component. You can probably, I highly recommend you guys to read the training kit from start to end in order to understand what this is doing. And it'll probably make sense. If it doesn't make sense, you can always DM me or Trevor. We'll be happy to explain. Right. Cool. And I guess that's it. We're done. Like I promised, 15 minutes, and we're done with all the logic. Oh, of course, we need to add the logout button. I spoke too soon. I take it back. Could this message replace the private route? Yes, that's exactly what we're doing. See, HOCs are good at one thing. They are good at replacing repetitive code. See how I had to actually copy paste this logic inside the login and the profile, and imagine if there was another protected route, right? If there's another protected route that leads to something else, like edit profile, if there's a route that says edit profile and you should show a form, that should also be protected. And the only way I can protect that route is by actually copying and pasting this. So my code is not really dry. The only way to make my code dry is to have a higher order component like private route, and then I can reuse the private route any number of times for any number of routes. So HOCs basically exist for you so that you can keep your code dry. Cool. So now I'm going to quickly make a logout button here. So let's go to the profile. We'll make a button of class name button, and I'm going to call it logout, like so. And all we're going to do is like delete the item and then push the user back onto the login page. We can do that with history.push. So on click, we're going to have a function here. We're going to say local storage dot remove item token. So remove the token, and now we need to push the user back onto the login page. And this logic will also come in handy. So whenever we receive an error, right? So we do have a token, we're making a request, but then we receive an error, probably because this token is expired or the token is malformed. In that case, we actually need to delete the token from the local storage. What happens if we don't delete is that you could, what will happen is like if you would go on an infinite loop, you would be permanently stuck on the profile page. The profile page is trying to contact the API, but the API is throwing an error. And you can't really go to the login page because there is a token and it won't allow you to go into the login page. So another good experience is to actually do the same thing inside the error statement. So if we have a wrong token inside the local storage, we will remove the incorrect token and push it back, push the user back into the login page. Nice. We're getting a nice error that we're missing a dependency that's called history. Not really required, but for the sake of completion, I don't know, I'm going to trust React and say that it probably needs to be in there. So let's log in. Let's check all of our flows. And password, enter. Oh my God, this is so annoying. Why don't you understand? Never. And we have a login button. Oops, that button looks ugly. I'm going to fix it. I have OCD. Okay. Nice. And now press log out. There you go. We're logged out. And if we go to profile, we're not allowed to go to the profile. Again, we log in as a different person. Password, enter. Nice. And if you go to go to the login page, we're not allowed to go into the login page because you're logged in and you need to log out in order to go out. So that is it. We've covered client-side authentication, albeit in a very, very basic and simple example, but you can imagine how the logic being extrapolated. I highly recommend you guys to go through the entire training kit before you attempt the project. And today's project is going to be a little lengthy, right? You probably saw the project. It's your favorite, Friends. I really wish this was Auth Smurfs, but unfortunately it's Auth Friends, the second best thing you love. So you're gonna have to install the server-side dependencies and run the server. And you need to create a React app inside this folder, like clone this repo. I understand that you guys, this is an old repo. You probably need to create a new branch. We will look into that logic now, but just clone when you start from scratch here, what you need to do is install the server-side dependencies and run the server with npm start, right? And then do create React app while you're inside the directory that has server.js. So you're going to have an extra folder inside here with your React app. And then go inside the React app and start building, do the thing that you do. And you need to do the following things. You need to have two different routes, one for a login page with username and password and submit button. Design this however you like. And the login function should save the return token to the local storage. Let me just quickly look at how you want to send the headers. I don't know if this is going to expect a bearer token or just token just like that. I'm gonna quickly look at the authenticator. Okay, so one small change from the guided demo, guys, is that when you send the Axios request, instead of saying bearer token, just send token. Okay, I just added that as a comment. So that's the only change. Pretty much everything else, and probably the endpoint changes. So let me just quickly look at it. Should be on the README, but I'm not sure why. Yes, instead of, remember how we made in the login on handle submit, we made a post request to API auth. Instead, you're going to be making a post request to API login. And it's not email and password, it's going to be username and password. And make sure to use the username Lambda School and the password as I love Lambda with these strange numbers that appear to be text. And none of the other logins are going to work. So make sure you have this username and password. I think that's on the README file. And so, okay, there is this documentation. So you need to first log in. And for every other GET route, see, everything, all of these routes are going to require the token. So this is exactly like your friend's project where you did the get, post, put, and delete. The only change from the early project is that when you send a request, you're also going to want to send the headers. So if you don't send the headers, you're going to see an error that says 403 unforbidden. Save for that, everything else is the same. And you need to add an additional logic where if you try to go to the view all the friends, it should kick you back to the login page if they are not logged in. And the same goes the other way. And read the training kit and try to implement the private route component. Try to use the HOC component. And that is for the MVP. And for the stretch, two more functions. Yeah, for the MVP, you need to be able to only add friends. And for the stretch problem, you need to make a form to also edit a particular friend and delete a particular friend. And styling is always a stretch. I always love this stretch. When I went through the curriculum, I always went for the stretch, no matter how much time it took. I just love styling. And that's it. So I think you should be good to go. Use the guided demo as a reference, but really do refer to the training kit a lot more. And that's it. I'm sorry again for having taken so much time. Can we use Axios with auth logic component we've used before? Yes, you can definitely do that. So instead of, what that basically does is like, instead of, where's it go? Yeah, instead of setting the headers every time you make a request, what you can do is like you can have a helper function that says Axios with auth, which will essentially return axios.create, and which has the headers in there. That is also on the training kit, if I'm not wrong. Here, the implementation is very, very same. You can just copy and paste it, and yeah, you can use that instead of making axios.get. You would just say axios with auth.get. Yeah, I did save the code sandbox. So here's the link again. You can just confirm if all the stuff I put it here is here. So that's it, guys, for me. So Elon, I think we could stop recording, and